Hey, y'all. You know, sometimes as a pastor, you preach a sermon, you finish it, right? You finish the recording, maybe on like we do on Thursdays, and then you think, oh, okay, I can add this or that, maybe tweak something on Sunday, and then Sunday happens, and then it's done, right? There are no more opportunities, and maybe you go to sleep or you're getting ready for the day, and it's like, man, I should have said that. And gosh, there's kind of too much to say next week. How do you work all this in? So today I'm doing a little bit of Monday morning, Monday afternoon sermon quarterbacking and maybe just cleaning up some things. Well, something I thought of that I wanted to add to what we talked about yesterday, which is, what is our purpose? Especially with the age of outrage, just in general. Scripturally, we are to be ambassadors. We're sent by the King, on mission. And so I was thinking about, especially, gosh, how can you not think about, politics? It's interesting to watch how parties act and people act. Um, how do parties act when they're the majority, right? When they have all three branches, what do they do? How do they behave? How does a party act when they're the minority? And not going to go into specifics there over the history, but you can see how people and parties act. And sometimes the minority party wants to act like the majority, even though they're not anymore, or vice versa. And when I think about the Christian church in North America, right, for a long time, as we talked about, it was the majority. And a lot of the secular voice was sidelined for the preferences and the influence that the Christian church had. So it was the majority. And we've talked about that cultural forking, going back to the Ash Wednesday service, where now the convicted Christians, that's convicted in a good way, are the minority voice in North America. And instead of, as Ed Stetzer talks about in this week's study video, is that Christians, instead of acting sent, we're still acting as if we've arrived. We've arrived instead of acting like we're sent. And in this sense, we talked about yesterday with armies and ambassadors, how the Roman Empire didn't have ambassadors, they had armies because they were empowered, they were in control, they were the supermajority. They didn't need ambassadors. They just needed armies to get people to behave the way they wanted them to. Other countries sent ambassadors to appease and to work diplomacy with Rome so they wouldn't bear the brunt of those armies. And I made this comment yesterday that for too often since post-Christendom began, a lot of ways the church is still sending armies and not ambassadors. I think this is really important because we're the minority group now, right? We're not in power. We don't have the influence we did. And so what good is our army? And so I think about really in relation to the early Christian church in the age of the Roman Empire at the peak of its power and influence, right? There was no Christian army. I mean, what good would it have done? That's what Jesus is trying to tell his followers that wanted a literal revolution. He's saying, you will get wiped out if you do that, all right? We're going to go a different way. And we've kind of, I'm just talking collectively, the Christian church has forgotten that. And so we're still sending our armies where we're getting decimated. And so think about to the early Christian church, all they had were ambassadors. And also think about this. When did the Christian church have its fastest growth of its existence? Okay? It was an ambassador only church within the Roman Empire. It started off very, think about a curve on a graph. It was very flat. It was growing a little bit, and then over time, right, it exponentially goes like this. And that was because of work of ambassadors, right? Not armies. And so when we think about how we are going to engage the age of outrage, really just engage culture, engage society, we're going to have to approach it very differently than we did 50 years ago and prior to that. We can't just show up and say, hey, I say this is how it's supposed to be. It doesn't work like that anymore. Yet we kind of keep banging our heads against the walls thinking it will. So I just wanted to sort of flesh that out a bit more, talk about the early Christian church and the success that it had. And look, I mean, it did what we want to do, right? It gained that influence, it gained that power, it became the majority of the Roman Empire through ambassadorship, not by force and not by coercing people to doing what they wanted them to do. The question then is, how do we behave as Christians if we ever get back to that status and that level of power? I think sometimes we're more effective as Christians when we're not the majority. But I want to be optimistic. I want to see kingdom growth. I want to see lives change, not for the sake of power, but I think it's for what we know the good it will do for people, for society, and the world. It is the reconciling of all things and of all people to God. So that's what we're doing. Thanks for listening to the little sermon extra part 2. And I look forward to continuing this on Sunday. So have a great week. Talk to you soon.